Hi, and welcome to my introduction to Copperplate Calligraphy part number 3. As always, I give an introduction of what we are going to be doing today and what I'm using. So I have guidelines in here. If you go to my Instagram account and follow the link on my bio, you're gonna find a folder called Calligraphy Guide Sheets. And in there, you can download a set of blank guide sheets for different calligraphy styles. The ones I think on my profile are portrait, but it doesn't matter. Like this is landscape and a little bit smaller, but you can build your own guidelines later on if you want to. Now, for this introduction for this video, I'm going to be talking about the group of the ends. So let's start very slowly. Okay, so in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the space on the guideline that I'm going to start working. So as always, the guidelines I'm using have a ratio of 2, 1, 2. And that means that this area is for the X height. And then we have 2 units for the ascenders. This line is the short ascenders and the long ascenders, and then 2 units for the descender area, short descenders and long descenders. And I'm gonna work mostly in this area today because the letters we are gonna do are basically inside the X height with an exception of last letter, which is letter Y. Okay, so I'm gonna be using a ballpoint pen as well as the nib to explain the shapes and the movements I'm doing. So the movement I'm going to start today, it's with an arch, and that's the beginning of my letter N. And this arch is gonna be followed by a movement that it's called compound curve or double turn, and looks like that. Okay, if you notice what's going on in here, I'm gonna go a little bit closer now. All right, so we are in this section. Okay, so what I'm doing in here is I'm using the slant of 55 degrees to follow the downstroke of this double turn or compound curve. So I'm gonna call it in here double turn. Okay, and as you can see in here, I have the first turn at the top and then a second turn from the bottom up. Okay, so I'm going to combine these 2 movements. Now, the group of the ends, mostly, a lot of us probably when we write cursive writing, maybe, or when we look at our phone and type on the phone, we mostly might see a shape that looks like that, which is like an italic N. And it's not that it's wrong, but I'm gonna say that in Copperplate, what I'm going to be using is this combination of movements. So you might be very accustomed to use this shape, but in this case, as you can see here, we only have 1 turn for the N. But for Copperplate, what I'm going to be using is an N built out of 2 arches at the top. So number 1, number 2, and exit following the 55 degree. So you can see here, I'm going down, following the slant, and I'm again going down, following the slant. And when I exit, I also exit in the same direction here. Okay, so all these movements are following the same angle. All right, regarding the width of this N, well, if you have seen the other 2 videos that I published, Introduction to Copperplate Calligraphy Part 1 and 2, I talk about the proportions of the alphabet and how every letter is related to each other. So when I'm looking at an oval shape, I'm looking at a shape that more or less I can see visually that the height equals to widths, and this is a very good ratio to understand more or less what are we looking at in here. Now, every one of us is different. So depending on how the proportions of this alphabet are for you, that will determine how wide is your letter N. Okay, so you can watch part 2 when I talk more about that. Now, let's do that with a pointed pen. Today, same as the second video, I am using a Hand 101 and Walnut ink. Okay, so I'm a right-hander and I'm using an oblique holder. It's not that everyone has to use it, but most of us might be using an oblique holder. You can also find other calligraphers that use a straight holder and a straight nib, and it's also possible. Okay, so you just need to find whatever works best for you. Okay, let's start with letter N. I'm going to start on the base of the X height, and from here, let me clean because there is a bit of paper. From the base of the X height, I'm going up really thin and around the corner, still thin, and now I'm starting to gradually apply pressure. The point with this movement is that while I'm going around the corner, the movement is still very, very, very thin. And I only apply pressure when I'm really close, when I have already turned the arch. Okay, so again, starting on the baseline and going up, around the corner is still thin, and now progressively applying pressure. Again, baseline, up, thin, and down. Now, once I'm in here at the bottom, at the baseline, I'm going to start from the base and going up. Some calligraphies will start in the middle. I always start from the bottom, so you will need to see which one is the movement that feels easier for you. Now, on the first video, I talked about that there is a reference point that is guiding our movements across the entire alphabet, and this reference point is halfway inside the X height. Now, the second movement, I'm going inside and going up really thin, around the corner for the second time, push, going back to thin again, and around the corner to exit. Okay, I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna go a little bit closer now so that you can see my movement with a little bit more detail. So, okay, I'm here now. All right, let me move the paper. So I'm gonna repeat that again. I'm starting on the baseline and going up really thin and around the corner, push, stop. Now I need to be looking at the middle, the center of the X height, because that's when the up stroke is gonna go away from the down stroke. Still thin, around the corner, push, quickly release, and exit following the 55-degree angle. So you can tell the difference, yeah? In here was a little bit wider, and in here is a little bit narrower. And which one do I want to set as my width? It depends on every other letter we created so far. So when we are doing your letter O's, they will need to be framed within the same width. So you might be in this scenario in here, or you might be in this one in here. Okay, for the moment, I'll try to go ahead with this one and repeat this width another time. Okay, again, from the baseline, really thin and going up. And thin at the top and push. From here, halfway up, the thin goes away from the thick, going around, follow the slant, goes back to thin, exit following the 55-degree angle. Now, we have, as you can see, N based of 2 arches. Okay. Now let's do the M, which is a cousin or a sister of letter N. because whatever is going on in here is going to be repeated on the letter M. So letter M, now we are facing a letter with 3 arches at the top. So the starting point is the same, going up and thin at the top and push. Repeat the same movement up, curvy and thin, down. And now I'm going to create the exact same movement I just did in here. So going up thin, thin at the top, push and release and exit. Okay, so what I'm doing at the moment is I'm looking at the negative space, at the counter space, and making sure that the counter space on both of these letters are very consistent, because I'm building an entire alphabet, and that means that every letter is related to each other. So I'm following the DNA of the alphabet and making sure that in here I have a very similar identity. Okay. Now, if we keep going with this double turn, so the double turn is what I do to exit this letter M and N. So I'll do it now separately, the double turn movement. So I'm going up and thin around the corner, push and release and exit. Okay, that's the movement I have done in here. Differences of what I'm doing at the moment is that you can tell for the exit of this N, I stopped halfway inside the X height. For the M, I exited halfway inside the X height. So that will depend if this is the end of my word or if it's a ligature that connects to the next letter form. So this is the arm holding hands to the next letter, or is the end of my letter form? Okay, in here, I have a double turn again. 1 and 2. And this is the beginning of my letter V. So to close letter V, to complete letter V, I'm going to be adding a loop. And this loop happens inside the letter form so that the contour is clean. And then now I'm extending the arm to be holding hands to the next letter form, because Copperplate is a script alphabet. So everything is connected to each other. So when we exit, unless it's the end of a word, we are always going to be holding hands to the next letter. So we have to be looking constantly at the black mark and the white, because what we are doing is writing always in black and white, always. The moment you write the black mark, you are defining the white space. So always writing in black and white at the same time. Now, let's do it again. And I'm going to be doing it now a little bit bigger so that we can look into detail at what shape we are creating here with the loop of the V. I'm going to just do it twice as big just to show you. So I'm going to be using now 2 units just to show you the movement of this letter form a lot clearer. Now, what I'm going to do, as I did in this case, is that my downstroke always follows the 55 degrees slant. Okay, so that's my 55 degrees. Okay, now I'm gonna start a lot bigger. So going up really thin around the corner, apply pressure, release pressure, and now going up. I'm going all the way up. And now what I do is I have 2 options. Option 1 is creating a loop as if I'm drawing the shape. And now my arm opens and is gonna hold hands to the next letter form. So I can create this loop, which is almost like if I was drawing the loop, and then I can come afterwards and fill that with ink. That's an option, depending. If we are writing something short, is okay. If we are writing a very long text, you probably don't want to be going backwards and filling all these small loops again and again, because it's very time consuming. Okay, now the shape that I'm creating in here, number 1 is like This shape looks like an elongated teardrop. So we are looking at a shape that looks more or less like that. Secondly, as I mentioned before, the contour of this letter is clean and the loop happens inside the letter form. I'll do another V. This time I'm just going to push against the paper instead of creating this loop as if I'm drawing the shape. Now, okay, I'll repeat the same again. I'm going up really thin around the corner, apply pressure, release pressure, going up again. And as I'm reaching the top of the X height, I apply pressure from the inside of the letter form. So you can see where the shape is, which is in the inside. And now I'm going to be opening my arm halfway in the middle of the X height. And now this will be my ligature for the next letter form. So when I'm doing this movement, when I'm exiting the letter and joining with the next letter form, I need to be looking at the space I have inside and the space I'm going to be creating on the outside, because we want them to be as similar as possible. Okay, so whatever I'm writing now, if it's a letter I want to be looking at this space, because now I'm going up, going to the right to make sure that the top is flat, and going down, and then releasing quickly and exiting. Okay. And I want to be looking at the space I'm creating between the letters, because it's very important. Okay, so we have the downstroke follows the slant, as you can tell in here. Okay, cool. Let's do the W now. So I'm gonna move the paper again, and I'm here, and this is my X height. And I have 2 units for the ascender and 2 units for the descenders. But so far, I only need to be focused on the X height, because there is no ascenders and descenders at the moment. So let's do the W, which is, again, the same relationship that we looked at when in here, we were studying letter N and letter M and the relationships between them. So let's go back in here again. All right, so now let's do the V and next the W. So I'm going up really thin around the corner, still thin, and press, release, loop inside the V, opening the arm to hold hands to the next letter form. That's my V. Now, if I do a W, so I'm going to repeat this movement twice. So I'm going up from the bottom, up from the baseline, up, thin around the corner, push and release, and up. Differences. Well, I haven't finished the letter yet. So that's the first part of my letter form. I'm going to go 1 millimeter to the right to make sure the top of my W is flat, and I apply pressure. Release pressure, and around the corner for the second time, press inside to create the loop, and then exiting halfway inside the X height to hold hands to the next letter form. All right, so again, V, trying to keep consistency of the width, and W, which is V times 2. If we look at Roman capitals, 2000 years ago, we will see a shape that a capital V looks like that. At that time, we won't find W's because there was no part of, W wasn't part of the Latin alphabet 2000 years ago, but then later on, we added W as part of the alphabet. And as you can tell, obviously, is the ligature of 2 V's next to each other. So basically is what we are looking at in this scenario in here. Now, let's do the last letter for today, which is gonna be letter Y. Now, when we do letter Y, well, before I go into letter Y, you're gonna find that in some exemplars, you're going to find W actually that looks like that. Let's go into this before the Y. When we studied letter U in the past, in part 1, I mentioned that letter I, I'm going up 1 millimeter to the right, and I'm going down. Now I have heaps of ink just came down, so I'm going to do this again. You can see the reference point is still happening in the same area. So thin and thicks are meeting or are going away in the same area, which is halfway inside the X height. Okay, again, really thin, going up, going to the right and down, going back to thin, exit, and the dot. Okay, and the meeting point halfway. Now, letter U is basically the ligature of two eyes. So I'm going up and then flat and then thin around the corner. I'm going up, flat, thin around the corner, exit, following the 55-degree angle. Okay, now the way how I write my W's follows the exact same shape of the V. In some exemplars, you're gonna find that the W now follows the shape of the letter U. So in this case, then we are gonna have a shape that is letter U, and then second letter U, and then add the loop, exit. All right, so this is alternative shapes for the letter W. I personally use that, but there are reasons why you can use that or use that. You can go and research why the exemplars look different and then decide which letter do you want to go with. All right, my personal approach is this one. So let's finish this group of letter forms that all follow the same double turn movements, which is, again, the double turn means we are going up from the baseline, around, push, and turn again. Okay, so we have this double turn movement. Now, things I want to look at in here. I want to have a space that is very similar on both sides. So in this case, it's getting too big. So I need to make a note to myself that this movement going up, it went a little bit too wide. So I want to do it again and go just a little bit narrower. Okay, following again the double turn, going up and going around, press, release before touching the baseline and up again. Now, once I'm at the top in here, this could be a letter V completely, but what we are doing now is a letter Y. So basically what I'm doing is the movement of a V plus the movement of a letter J. So when we did the J in the other session, we talked about this letter form with a loop, crossing on the baseline and exiting. Once we combine these two shapes, we are going to be looking at the letter Y. Okay. Now, the same concept of consistency applied to the widths. The same concept is applied to the loops. So this is the loop of my J. And then each of us will have a different style. Some of you will have a really thin loop. Some of you will have a much wider loop. And to me, I mentioned that this is totally okay. It's just depending on consistency. So whatever the loop of my J looks like, I just want to be looking at the loop of my Y and trying to create a very similar shape. So let's combine these two movements together to do letter Y. So I'm going up, double turn, thin, apply pressure, following the slant, thin, and up. I'm going 1 millimeter to the right and down, as if I'm doing letter J. Release, around, cross on the baseline, exit. And of course, it's never going to be exactly the same, because that's the reason why we do this by hand and not otherwise, if we wanted to be mathematically the same, we will be using a font where every loop is exactly the same, but we are not using fonts, we are doing calligraphy by hand. So it's always going to be slightly different, and you have to be okay about that, because that's the point. That's the point of having like a very humanistic approach and result, because we are doing it by hand. Now, I'm happy because they look pretty good, pretty similar. You can tell that the upstroke crosses the downstroke on the baseline of the X height, which is what I want. You can see that the downstroke in here follows the 55 degrees slant. Good. The top in here is flat. Good. Okay. The thin and thicks, can you see in here? The thin and thicks are still meeting halfway inside the X height. Good. So I have all these reference points for me to do self-evaluation, because the way to self-evaluate yourself is how you can keep improving on the writing. If you understand, if it looks odd, you understand why it looks odd, then this is going to help you a lot to then keep improving. Now, once I have this letter Y, if I turn the paper 180 degrees, and now what we are looking at in here is the shape of my letter H. So basically, by doing letter Y, I'm already getting a lot of information of what is it going to be happening once I approach all the ascenders, which is L's, H, K's, F's. Okay, so by looking at letter Y, I understand that the alphabet is like a puzzle made out of small pieces, and that each piece is connected to each other. And what we are designing and building in here is an alphabet, is members of a really large family of 26 members, and that each member is related to each other. Okay. Now let's put a couple of words together so that we see all of these letters in action. Now, for example, let's write mint. I'm gonna go and use a ballpoint pen, because I think this is very, very useful to understand the letter forms and also the spacing, and to study what is going on with my word before I attempt to go with a thin and thick. Now, I'm gonna write the word mint. So I'm gonna start with the M that you can see here at the top. So I'm going up, down, first arch, I'm going up and down, second arch, I'm going up and down, third arch, and now ligature to letter I. Then I'm going down and I have a double turn. And then I have another arch for my letter N, and all the way up till the short ascender line for my letter T, and exit. Okay. Now, once I finish the letter form, I place the dot of the I, and I decide if this is a straight or a curvy crossbar of the T. Things I want to be looking at in here. When I do it with the pointed pen, I already know my movements, and I know that I go really slow because I want to obtain precise movements, precise shapes. So I'm gonna mark in here how many stops I'm going to do with this word. So when I create the first arch of the M, I'm gonna be stopping in here. So after the first arch, that's my first stop. I'm gonna build the second arch and stop again. Then I'm gonna build the third arch and going all the way up and stopping here. You don't need to follow these steps, and you don't need to stop so many times, but I want to show you that the way how I write, a lot of the times follow various short movements, and then I connected everything, and when it's finished, it's done and no one knows. But I tend to control the movements really carefully so that everything relates to each other. So I'm looking constantly at the black and the white, the black and the white. Now, from the top of the eye, I'm connecting it to the bottom of the N. And then from here, I build the arch of the N. I go up to the T. I stop in here. I go down and I exit. Okay, so I have 5 stops and number 6 is the exit. And then number 7 and 8 is actually the dot of the I and the crossbar of the T. So that is how many movements I might be able to do if I want to really build this word very carefully. Now let's do it with the thin and thicks. Now also things I'm looking at in here are, as I mentioned, the space inside the letter forms, the counter space for M, for N, and I want them to be as similar as possible because they are members of the same family. And at the same time, what happens inside as well as what happens in between, because it needs to be pretty similar. All right, so this is the pattern of movements. Okay, let's do that with the thin and thicks. Here, all right. Again, there is no ascenders or descenders, so I'm just going to be focused on the X height. So we have a short ascender for letter T. So we'll be using this space at the end of the word. Okay, let's do this with the thin and thicks. So I'm going very thin from the baseline of the X height up. Around the corner, push, and then the same again, around the corner, and the same again. I go up following the 55-degree angle. I stop at the top, flat, and then up and down to create the beginning of the N, going up, second turn for the N, and all the way up now till the top of the short ascender line. I go 1 millimeter to the right and I'm going down. And I exit following the 55-degree angle. Now, I can create an elongated shape if I wanted to, and if I want, instead of a straight line, I can create a curving movement like that. Okay, that's an option. And all the stuff that I pointed out before with the ballpoint pen is what I'm looking at in here. I need to be careful, yeah, because in some places I feel like I'm losing the angle. So I need to watch out in here and be like, hey, be careful, what's going on? Now, let's do another example. So let's write YUM, Y-U-M. Okay, so starting on the baseline and going up, very thin, around the corner, down, up, 1 millimeter flat to the right. Let's move the paper. Okay, now I follow the 55-degree slant and opening, loop, going up, and 1 millimeter to the right. Okay, now letter U, letter U, and letter M, following the slant. So all of this is following the same slant, and I'm trying to follow the same width all across these shapes in here. Okay, so I'm building this letter form and paying very much attention to the black and the whites, black and whites. And of course, sometimes we press more, sometimes we press less. So the next challenge as well, not only about the angle, the next challenge is making sure that the amount of pressure is constant, which it comes with practice. Okay, so I need to watch out with the angles and make sure everything follows the same slant. Last one. Let's write win, for example. Okay, base of the X height, I'm going up, around, thin, follow the slant, and thin going up. 1 millimeter to the right, first stop. I keep going down and up again, push inside the W to create the loop. From the inside of the W, I open my arm and hold hands to the letter I. Down, thin, and letter N. And from here, second arch, thin and thick, exit. And the dot of the I, which can be a circle or can be an elongated teardrop, as I did in the other word. And again, I want to be looking at these areas. Here and here. Okay, everything follows and everything is holding hands together. You can see that this joint between the W and the I obviously does not go to the baseline. It's roughly positioned in the center of the X height. Okay, so the exit of the V and the exit of the W, and it will happen the same with the O's and the B's, will be exiting roughly in the center of the X height. So double turn, up, the loop inside, and opening my arm halfway inside the X height to hold hands to the next letter form. All right, so I hope this video was helpful. Today we had a look at the group of the N's, M's, V's, W's, and letter Y. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll leave my details on the comments of this video. Thank you very much.